The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the officers' club. Crystal fragments scattered like my shattered composure as Admiral Catherine Hayes stepped through the crowd, her steel-gray eyes locked on mine. The room fell silent. 200 guests frozen mid-conversation, their faces turning from the newly promoted Rear Admiral Marcus Bennett, my father, to me. "Commander Sarah Bennett," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "We need to talk." My father's face was drained of color, the same man who had just finished telling his closest friends how proud he was of his successful children. My brother Jake, the decorated pilot, and my sister Emma, the Pentagon analyst, while pointedly avoiding any mention of his middle daughter, the failure, the washout, the one who couldn't cut it in the real Navy. But Admiral Hayes wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me, and in her eyes I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 6 months earlier, I had been sitting in a cramped office in Norfolk, Virginia, staring at termination papers that felt heavier than anchors. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Bennett," they read. "Effective immediately, reassignment to administrative duties, pending review." Translation: career over before it truly began. The official reason was failure to meet operational standards during Exercise Storm Shield. The real reason was standing behind me in his dress whites, clipboard in hand, watching me sign away everything I'd worked for since I was 18. "It's for the best, Sarah," my father had said, his voice carrying that practiced tone he used when delivering bad news to subordinates. "The sea isn't for everyone, even Bennett's." I had wanted to remind him that I'd graduated third in my class at Annapolis, that I'd earned my surface warfare pin faster than anyone in my cohort, that the only reason Storm Shield had gone sideways was because someone had fed our patrol coordinates to the opposing force. But what was the point? Marcus Bennett had already made up his mind about his daughter's capabilities the day I chose the Navy over law school. The Norfolk Naval Station buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Sailors hurried between buildings, their uniforms crisp despite the humid Virginia heat. I walked slowly, savoring what might be my last time wearing the uniform that had defined me for 8 years. My new assignment was to the Personnel Records Division, military purgatory, where careers went to die quietly. Building 8-47 was a testament to bureaucratic efficiency: beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and the perpetual smell of coffee and printer toner. My new supervisor, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, greeted me with the kind of smile reserved for lost causes. "Welcome to the paper Navy, ma'am," she said, gesturing to a desk buried under file folders. "Your job is simple: digitize personnel records from 1995 to 20. Shouldn't take more than, the rest of your career." The work was mind-numbing. Hour after hour, I scanned documents, uploaded files, and tried not to think about the destroyer I should have been commanding by now. But 3 weeks into my exile, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold: Operation Midnight Current. Classified mission logs from 2008, buried deep in a misfiled folder marked training exercises. Routine. I almost missed it entirely, but the dates caught my eye. March 15 to 22. The mission briefing was sparse, just enough detail to paint a picture of a covert operation in the South China Sea. Intelligence gathering, radio silence protocols, and there, halfway down the page, was a name that stopped my heart: Lieutenant Commander Marcus Bennett, Mission Commander. My father had been in the South China Sea in March 20. The same week he told our family he was attending a routine training exercise in San Diego. The same week my mother had waited by the phone every night, worried sick because his calls were delayed due to communications issues. I dug deeper. Supply manifest showed equipment transfers that didn't match any training exercise. Personnel rosters included specialists in electronic warfare and cryptography. This wasn't training. This was the real thing. And my father had lied to everyone, including his own family, about where he was and what he was doing. But that wasn't the part that made my hands shake. At the bottom of the operational summary, in the section marked Mission Outcome, someone had written in red ink, "Complete success." Intelligence package delivered. 0 casualties. Recommend commendations for all personnel. Below that, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, special recognition for outstanding performance under pressure. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, electronic warfare specialist. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a woman who had performed so exceptionally during a classified mission that the commanding officer, my father, had personally recommended her for commendation. A woman whose name had been carefully omitted from any official record I could find. I spent the next week searching every database I had access to. Sarah Chen had been a rising star in the Navy's intelligence community, top secret clearance, multiple deployments, glowing fitness reports, and then in September 2008, she had simply vanished from the record. No transfer orders, no resignation, no disciplinary action. She had been erased as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. The parallels to my own situation were impossible to ignore. A competent officer, suddenly sidelined without explanation. The only difference was that Sarah Chen had disappeared entirely. While I had merely been relegated to filing cabinets and fluorescent lights, I was still staring at the screen when Chief Rodriguez appeared on my shoulder. Finding anything interesting in the old files, I minimized the window quickly, probably too quickly. Just routine digitization, Chief. She studied my face for a moment, then glanced at the computer screen. Word of advice, ma'am, sometimes the most interesting files are the ones that aren't supposed to exist, and sometimes the people who find those files have a habit of reassignment. The warning was subtle but clear. I was already in exile. I couldn't afford to dig any deeper, but that night, lying in my barracks bunk, I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah Chen. What had happened to her? Why had she been erased? And why was my father involved? The answers started coming 3 days later, in the most unexpected way possible. I was processing a batch of fitness reports from 2009 when I found another anomaly. A performance evaluation for a Lieutenant Commander David Walsh, dated 6 months after Sarah Chen's disappearance. In the comments section, Walsh's superior had written, "Exceptional officer, but still struggling with the loss of his former team member. Recommend counseling to address ongoing grief over Chen incident." Chen incident. Not transfer, not resignation. Incident. I searched for David Walsh's current assignment and found him stationed at the Pentagon, working in naval intelligence. A phone call confirmed he was still active duty, still in D.C., and when I mentioned Sarah Chen's name, the silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Where did you hear that name?" he finally asked. "Official record. I'm digitizing personnel files from that time period." Another pause. "Those records are supposed to be classified." "They're not. They're sitting in a filing cabinet in Norfolk, misfiled under training exercises." I heard him exhale slowly. Someone made a mistake. A big one. We arranged to meet the following weekend. Walsh was older than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of weathered face that came from too many deployments and too many secrets. He chose a diner in Virginia Beach, far enough from any military installations to ensure privacy. "Sarah Chen was the best intelligence analyst I ever worked with," he said without preamble, stirring sugar into coffee he didn't seem to actually want to drink. "Brilliant, dedicated, fearless. She could crack encrypted communications faster than most people could read plain text." "What happened to her?" His jaw tightened. "She found something she wasn't supposed to find. Something that went all the way to the top." "What kind of something?" I shook my head. Neither had most people. It was a joint operation between Navy intelligence and the CIA, designed to monitor Chinese naval communications in the South China Sea. Completely legitimate, completely authorized, except someone was selling the intelligence to a private defense contractor instead of sending it up the chain. My blood ran cold. Someone in naval intelligence. Someone with access to the highest levels of classified information. Someone who could authorize missions, assign personnel, and bury evidence. He met my eyes. Sarah figured it out. She traced the data flows, identified the breach, and compiled a report that would have sent half a dozen flag officers to Leavenworth. And then, officially, she was killed in a car crash while on leave. Unofficial? Well, let's just say the timing was remarkably convenient. I felt sick. Who was selling the intelligence? Walsh stared into his coffee cup. The mission commander for Operation Midnight Current, the man who had access to everything. Sarah discovered, the man who recommended her for commendation one day and ordered her silenced the next. He didn't need to say the name, I already knew. My father wasn't just complicit in Sarah Chen's disappearance, he was the reason she was dead. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The drive back to Norfolk felt like swimming through concrete. Every mile marker reminded me that I was returning to a world where my father was respected, decorated, trusted, where his word carried the weight of 3 decades of service, and mine carried the stain of failure. But now I knew the truth about Marcus Bennett's rise through the ranks. How many careers had he destroyed to protect his secret? How many good officers had been quietly transferred, demoted, or worse? Back in my quarters, I spread Walsh's business card across my desk like evidence. He'd given me his secure contact information, and a warning that still echoed in my ears. Be careful who you trust, this goes deeper than you think. I spent the next morning in the records room, searching for any trace of the officers who had served under my father during Operation Midnight Current. What I found was a pattern of broken careers that made my stomach turn. Lieutenant James Morrison, communications specialist, transferred to a desk job in Alaska 6 months after the mission, never promoted again. Commander Lisa Park, navigation officer, forced into early retirement after a fitness for duty evaluation. Captain Robert Hayes, second in command, died in a training accident that was never fully investigated. Each of them had been systematically destroyed, their careers ended or their lives cut short, all to protect Marcus Bennett's secret. The secure phone call came 3 days later, routed through enough encrypted channels to make the NSA jealous. The voice on the other end was female, professional, and terrified. You've been asking questions about Sarah Chen. Who is this? Someone who worked with her. Someone who should have died with her. A pause filled with digital static. Meet me tonight. Ocean View Pier. 11 o'clock. Come alone, and don't tell anyone where you're going. The line went dead. Ocean View Pier stretched into the Atlantic like a finger pointing toward secrets. The October wind cut through my jacket as I walked toward the end, where a lone figure stood silhouetted against the distant lights of Norfolk. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with short blonde hair and eyes that never stopped moving. When she turned to face me, I saw a scar running from her left temple to her jaw, the kind of mark that came from close encounters with death. Jennifer Walsh, she said, extending a hand that trembled slightly. David's my brother. He said you could be trusted. You knew Sarah Chen? She nodded, pulling a manila envelope from her jacket. We were partners, electronic warfare specialists assigned to the same unit. I was supposed to be on the mission that killed her. What happened? Food poisoning. Convenient, right? Kept me in sickbay while Sarah went out alone. Her laugh was bitter as the winter wind. Took me 3 years to figure out it wasn't food poisoning. Someone slipped me something to make sure I wouldn't be there to witness what really happened. She handed me the envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, and a small digital recorder. Sarah was paranoid the last few weeks before she died. She knew someone was watching her, knew her communications were being monitored. So she started keeping physical records, old school. These are copies of everything she found about Project Tidewater. I opened the first document under the pier's security light. It was a financial transfer record showing payments from Blackwater Maritime, a private defense contractor, to an account registered under the name Ann Hartwell. The amounts were staggering, $2 million over 6 months. Ma'am Hartwell. Marcus Bennett's middle name is Hartwell. Sarah traced the payments back to him through 3 shell companies and a Swiss bank account. Jennifer's voice was barely audible over the wind. Your father wasn't just selling intelligence. He was selling American lives. The next document was a communication intercept showing Chinese naval positions in the South China Sea, dated 1 week before a U.S. submarine patrol was attacked by unknown forces. 3 sailors died in that attack. 3 families were destroyed because Marcus Bennett needed money more than he valued American lives. Why didn't Sarah take this to naval intelligence? She tried, but her first stop was Commander Patricia Wells, head of the intelligence division. Wells told her to drop the investigation, saying it was above her pay grade. Sarah realized Wells was part of it. My hands shook as I turned to the next page. A list of names, all officers who had been involved in various operations over the past 5 years, officers who had died in accidents, been transferred to isolated postings, or simply disappeared from the service entirely. Sarah Chen had documented a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of naval intelligence, and at the center of it all was my father. "There's more," Jennifer said, pressing the digital recorder into my palm. Sarah's last message. She recorded it the night before she died. I hesitated, knowing that once I heard Sarah's voice, there would be no going back. No pretending this was all a mistake or a misunderstanding. No way to return to the comfortable lie that my father was a hero. I pressed play. Sarah Chen's voice was steady but exhausted. The sound of someone who knew she was running out of time. "If you're hearing this, then they got to me. My name is Lieutenant Sarah Chen, and I've discovered evidence of a conspiracy within naval intelligence to sell classified information to foreign contractors. The operation is being run by Rear Admiral Marcus Bennett, with assistance from Commander Patricia Wells and at least 6 other senior officers. I wanted to stop the recording, to pretend I'd never heard my father's name spoken with such certainty and fear. But Sarah wasn't finished. Bennett has been using his position to identify and eliminate anyone who gets too close to the truth. The car accident that killed Commander Stevens last year, the training exercise that went wrong and killed Captain Morrison, those weren't accidents. Bennett has been systematically murdering American officers to protect his operation. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, detailing financial records, communication intercepts, and operational plans that painted a picture of corruption so vast it defied comprehension. By the time it ended, I was shaking. "What happened to Commander Wells?" I asked. "Promoted to Admiral and transferred to the Pentagon 6 months after Sarah died. She's now head of Naval Intelligence Operations." Jennifer's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Funny how protecting murderers can advance your career." I stared out at the dark ocean, trying to process what I'd learned. My father wasn't just corrupt, he was a killer. The man who had raised me, who had taught me about honor and duty and service, had been murdering his fellow officers to protect his criminal enterprise. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Sarah's murder is about to be ruled an accident officially. The case file will be sealed, the evidence destroyed. Unless someone with access to current naval systems can reopen the investigation. I'm stuck in a records office. I don't have access to active case files." Jennifer smiled for the first time since we'd met. "You don't need access to active files. You need access to the people who created them. And lucky for us, there's someone in the Pentagon who's been waiting 3 years for a chance to bring down Marcus Bennett." She handed me a business card with a single name and phone number. Admiral Catherine Hayes. She was Sarah's first commanding officer, her mentor. "She's been building a case against your father ever since Sarah died, but she needed someone on the inside, someone with access to the original records." "Someone with the right last name," I said, understanding Dawn. "Bennett's daughter investigating Bennett's crimes? The media will love it. More importantly, it'll force the Navy to take action instead of covering it up." The wind picked up, sending salt spray across the pier. In the distance I could see the lights of a destroyer heading out to sea, carrying sailors who trusted their commanders to keep them safe. Sailors like the ones my father had betrayed. "There's something else," Jennifer said, pulling a final document from her jacket. "Something Sarah discovered right before she died. Your father isn't working alone. There's someone above him, someone in the Pentagon who's been coordinating the entire operation." I took the document with numb fingers. It was a communication log showing encrypted messages between Marcus Bennett and someone identified only as Phoenix. The messages were brief but clear. Target lists, operational schedules, and payment confirmations. The last message was dated the day before Sarah Chen died. Chen problem resolved. Payment confirmed. Phoenix? Who is Phoenix? Jennifer shook her head. Sarah never figured it out, but whoever they are, they're the real power behind this operation. Your father is just the muscle. As we walked back toward shore, Jennifer stopped and turned to me one last time. Sarah died trying to protect American sailors from people who were supposed to be protecting them. She died trying to do the right thing. Now it's your turn. I clutched the evidence against my chest, feeling the weight of Sarah Chen's sacrifice and the responsibility it placed on my shoulders. Tomorrow I will call Admiral Hayes. Tomorrow I will begin the process of exposing my father's crimes. Tonight, I would grieve for the father I thought I knew and prepare to face the monster he really was. The Pentagon was a maze of power and secrets, each corridor lined with portraits of heroes I'd once admired. Walking through those halls with Sarah Chen's evidence burning in my briefcase felt like carrying a bomb through a cathedral. Admiral Catherine Hayes's office was on the 4th floor, tucked between the Navy's Strategic Planning Division and a door marked simply Classified Operations. When I knocked, her assistant, a sharp-eyed lieutenant with the bearing of someone who'd seen too much, escorted me through 2 security checkpoints before finally opening the inner door. Hayes was younger than I'd expected for a 3-star admiral, maybe 50, with silver hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that seemed to calculate every word before it was spoken. She didn't look up from her desk when I entered. Commander Bennett. I wondered when you'd finally reach out. Ma'am? She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Your friend Jennifer Walsh called ahead. Said you had some interesting reading material. I placed the evidence on her desk. The documents, the photographs, Sarah Chen's final recording. Hayes examined each piece with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent years building cases that could topple governments. This is exactly what I needed, she said finally. But it's also exactly what will get you killed. The bluntness of her statement hit like a physical blow. Ma'am, your father has murdered 7 people in the last 3 years to prevent this operation. What makes you think he'll hesitate to kill his own daughter? I had no answer for that. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with calculus homework seemed incapable of murder, but then again, I'd thought he was incapable of treason too. Hayes activated a secure communication device on her desk. This conversation is now classified, top secret. Everything we discuss leaves this room over my dead body. Understood? I nodded. Good. Now let me tell you what you've stumbled into. She pulled out a classified folder marked Operation Nightfall Eyes Only. For the past 18 months, I've been running a joint investigation with the FBI, CIA, and Naval Criminal Investigative Service. We've been tracking a network of defense contractors who've been purchasing classified intelligence from sources within the Pentagon. She opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos, financial records, and organizational charts that made my head spin. The network is sophisticated, well-funded, and absolutely ruthless. They've infiltrated multiple branches of the military, several defense contractors, and at least 2 foreign intelligence services. The money involved is staggering. We're talking about billions of dollars in illegal arms sales, technology transfers, and strategic intelligence. And my father is part of this? Your father is one of their primary assets. But he's not at the top of the food chain. Hayes pulled out another document, this one showing a complex organizational structure with code names instead of real identities. We've identified at least 12 high-ranking military officers involved in the conspiracy, including 2 admirals, a Marine Corps general, and the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. My mouth went dry. The Phoenix contact Jennifer mentioned. Hayes's expression darkened. We believe Phoenix is Admiral Patricia Wells, now head of Naval Intelligence Operations. She's been coordinating the entire network from her position at the Pentagon, using her access to compartmentalized intelligence to identify targets and eliminate threats. The scope of the conspiracy was overwhelming. This wasn't just about my father selling secrets. It was about a cancer that had metastasized throughout the entire defense establishment. What do you need from me? Access. Your father trusts you, or at least he did before you started digging. We need someone who can get close to him, record conversations, and access his personal communications. Someone he won't suspect. The request felt like being asked to hold the knife while someone carved out my own heart. You want me to spy on my father? I want you to help us stop him before he gets more Americans killed. Hayes's voice was steel wrapped in silk. The Chinese submarine attack I mentioned, the one where 3 sailors died, we intercepted communications showing that your father provided the submarine's patrol route to a Chinese contact 12 hours before the attack. The room spun. Those sailors had families, children who would grow up without fathers because Marcus Bennett needed money for his Swiss bank account. There's something else, Hayes continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. We have intelligence suggesting the network is planning something big. A major operation that will compromise American security at the highest levels. We don't know what, when, or where, but we know your father is central to the planning. She handed me a small device that looked like a standard Navy communication badge. This is a recording device, military-grade encryption, voice-activated, completely undetectable. Wear it during any conversation with your father. Everything will be transmitted directly to our secure servers. I stared at the device knowing that accepting it would cross a line I could never uncross. What happens to my family when this goes public? Your brother and sister will be investigated, but cleared, assuming they're innocent. Your mother will face scrutiny but likely won't be charged unless we find evidence of direct involvement. As for you, Hayes paused. You'll either be remembered as a hero who helped expose the greatest military conspiracy in American history, or you'll be dead. The weight of that statement settled over me like a lead blanket. But I thought about Sarah Chen, about the 3 dead sailors, about all the Americans who might die if this conspiracy continued. I pinned the device to my uniform. What's the plan? Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Tomorrow night is your father's promotion party. Every major figure in the conspiracy will be there, including Admiral Wells. It's the perfect opportunity to gather intelligence and identify additional members of the network. And if they suspect something, then we activate Operation Lighthouse. Hayes pulled out a thick manila folder. Full tactical response. FBI raids on 12 locations simultaneously. Arrest warrants for 15 individuals. Asset seizures across 6 countries. We bring down the entire network in one coordinated strike. The scope was breathtaking. Months of planning, hundreds of agents, international cooperation, all waiting for the evidence I could provide. There's one more thing, Hayes said as I prepared to leave. Your father's promotion to Rear Admiral? It wasn't based on merit. Wells arranged it to give him access to even more classified intelligence. The promotion party isn't just a celebration, it's a business meeting. They're planning to close several major deals that night. I felt sick. My family would be celebrating Marcus Bennett's achievement while he planned to sell out his country. Commander Bennett, Hayes called as I reached the door. Remember that your father chose this path. You're not betraying him. You're stopping him from betraying everyone else. The drive back to Norfolk gave me 6 hours to think about what I'd committed to. 6 hours to imagine my father's face when he realized his daughter had brought down his empire. 6 hours to wonder if I had the strength to destroy my own family to save my country. But every time I wavered, I heard Sarah Chen's voice on that recording. The voice of a woman who'd died, trying to do the right thing, killed by people who were supposed to protect her. My secure phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Walsh. Your father just booked 3 flights to non-extradition countries. Departure date: the day after his promotion party. They were planning to run, which meant tomorrow night wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was my last chance to stop them. I called Admiral Hayes immediately. They're planning to flee after the party, I said without preamble. Then we move up the timeline. Operation Lighthouse goes active tomorrow night. During the party itself, Can you handle recording multiple conversations in a crowded environment? I thought about Sarah Chen, about the dead sailors, about all the Americans whose lives depended on stopping this conspiracy. Yes, ma'am. I can handle it. Good. Because tomorrow night, we will end this. As I hung up, I realized I was no longer just investigating my father's crimes. I was actively participating in his downfall. The girl who'd spent her childhood wanting nothing more than to make Marcus Bennett proud was about to destroy him. But some things were more important than family loyalty. Some things were worth sacrificing everything for. Tomorrow night, at his own promotion party, I would help bring down my father and save my country, even if it killed me. The Officers' Club at Naval Station Norfolk gleamed like a museum of military tradition. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished brass railings, and portraits of naval heroes who'd probably never imagined their sacred halls would host such corruption. I stood in the foyer, watching my father work the room in his new Rear Admiral's uniform, the 2 stars on his collar catching the light like tiny accusations. The recording device felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds against my chest. Every conversation I captured tonight could send these people to prison for life or get me killed before I could testify. Sarah, there you are. My mother, Elizabeth Bennett, appeared at my elbow in a navy blue dress that matched her husband's uniform. Her smile was radiant, the pride in her voice unmistakable. Your father's been looking for you. He wants to introduce you to some important people. Important people. If only she knew how important it is. Marcus Bennett stood near the bar, deep in conversation with a woman I recognized from surveillance photos. Admiral Patricia Wells, the Phoenix herself. Even from across the room I could see the cold calculation in her eyes, the way she surveyed the crowd like a predator selecting prey. Admiral Wells, my father was saying as I approached, his voice carrying that perfect blend of respect and confidence that had fooled so many people for so many years. I'd like you to meet my daughter, Commander Sarah Bennett. Wells extended a manicured hand, her grip firm but somehow threatening. Commander Bennett, your father speaks of you often. Nothing good, I'm sure, I replied, forcing a laugh that felt like swallowing glass. On the contrary, Wells said, her smile sharp as a blade. He tells me you've been working in records management. Important work, keeping track of our institutional memory. The emphasis on keeping track sent ice down my spine. She knew. Somehow Admiral Patricia Wells knew I'd been digging through classified files. Just doing my part, ma'am. Of course you are. Wells's eyes never left mine. I imagine you've seen some fascinating documents in that position. Historical artifacts, operational summaries from years past. Sometimes old files can be quite illuminating. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Patricia, perhaps we should— Oh, I think Commander Bennett can handle a little shop talk, Wells interrupted. After all, she comes from good military stock. I'm sure she understands the importance of discretion when handling sensitive materials. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Wells was telling me she knew about my investigation and warning me to stay quiet. What she didn't know was that every word was being recorded and transmitted to Admiral Hayes's tactical team. Discretion is everything in the Navy. I agreed. Speaking of which, congratulations on your promotion to Head of Naval Intelligence Operations, ma'am. That must involve some fascinating work. Wells's smile faltered for just a moment.
Fascinating and dangerous.
Sometimes people in intelligence positions find themselves in over their heads. Sometimes they discover information they're not equipped to handle properly. Like Sarah Chen? The words slipped out before I could stop them. The temperature in our little circle dropped 20 degrees. My father's face went pale, and Wells's expression turned deadly. I'm sorry, Wells said, her voice like silk wrapped around steel. I don't believe I know that name. Former intelligence analyst. Died in a car accident 3 years ago. I came across her personnel file while digitizing records. Tragic, Wells said. These accidents happen more often than people realize. Young officers taking unnecessary risks, driving too fast, not paying attention to their surroundings. Her eyes bored into mine. Sometimes they simply don't realize how dangerous the roads can be. My father stepped forward, his hand finding my elbow. Sarah, why don't we get some air? It's getting warm here. But before we could move, another voice cut through the crowd. Admiral Wells, how convenient to find you here. Agent Michael Torres of the FBI emerged from the crowd, his badge discreetly visible in his jacket pocket. Behind him, 3 more agents positioned themselves strategically around the room. Wells's composure cracked for the first time all evening. Agent Torres, I wasn't aware that the FBI was invited to this celebration. We weren't, Torres replied smoothly. We're here on business. Admiral Patricia Wells, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit treason, murder in the first degree, and violation of the Espionage Act. The room exploded into chaos. Guests scattered, glasses shattered, and I heard my mother scream from somewhere behind me. But all I could focus on was my father's face as he realized what was happening. Sarah, he whispered, understanding dawning in his eyes. What have you done? What you should have done years ago, I replied. The right thing. Wells made a break for the emergency exit, but Admiral Hayes appeared as if from nowhere, blocking her path. Going somewhere, Patricia? Catherine. Wells's voice was poisonous. I should have known you were behind this. Sarah Chen says hello, Hayes replied, and I watched Wells's face crumble as she realized the full scope of her downfall. FBI agents moved through the crowd with surgical precision, arresting conspirators I hadn't even known were present. Commander Lisa Rodriguez from Naval Intelligence, Captain James Morrison from Fleet Operations, even Colonel Bradley Thompson from the Marine Corps, who'd been standing near the dessert table looking perfectly innocent 5 minutes ago. But my father hadn't moved. He stood frozen, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of betrayal, rage, and something that might have been pride. Rear Admiral Marcus Bennett, Agent Torres announced, approaching with handcuffs. You're under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of the Espionage Act. Dad, I started, but he held up a hand to stop me. Don't, he said quietly. Don't apologize for doing your duty. Torres began reading him his rights, but my father kept talking, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. You know what the worst part is, Sarah? It's that you're better than I ever was. You're the kind of officer I used to be, before I forgot what service really meant. The words hit harder than any accusation could have. This wasn't the man who'd called me a failure, who'd questioned my commitment, who'd watched my career crumble without lifting a finger. This was my father, the one I'd looked up to as a child, finally admitting what we both knew. I hadn't failed him. He'd failed me. I'm sorry it came to this, I said as Torres led him away. Marcus Bennett paused at the door, looking back at me one last time. I'm not. You saved more lives tonight than I ever did in 30 years of service. As the arrests continued, I found myself standing alone in the center of the room, surrounded by overturned tables and broken glass. The promotion party had become a crime scene, and the man I'd spent my life trying to please was being loaded into a federal prisoner transport vehicle. Admiral Hayes appeared at my side, her expression unreadable. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about Sarah Chen, about the 3 dead sailors, about all the Americans who would go home safe because we'd stopped this conspiracy tonight. Like I finally understand what honor means, I said. Hayes nodded. Your father was right about one thing. You are better than he was. The question is, what are you going to do with that? I looked around the destroyed party, at the agents still processing evidence, at my mother crying in the corner while my siblings tried to comfort her. My family was shattered, my father's legacy destroyed, and my own future uncertain. But for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. I'm going to keep serving, I said, the right way this time. Admiral Hayes smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Good, because we have about 50 cases that could use an officer with your particular talents for uncovering uncomfortable truths. As the last of the conspirators were led away, I realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The failure my father had dismissed, the daughter he'd written off, had just brought down the largest military corruption scandal in American history. The girl who'd wanted nothing more than to make Marcus Bennett proud had finally succeeded by proving she was nothing like him at all. But the celebration would have to wait. Agent Torres was approaching with a thick folder and a grim expression. "Commander Bennett," he said, "we need to talk. The evidence you helped us gather tonight has revealed something else, something bigger." I took the folder, already knowing that whatever was inside would change everything again. "What is it?" "The Chinese submarine attack your father facilitated. It wasn't random. They were targeting a specific vessel carrying a specific cargo." Torres's voice dropped to a whisper. "Weapons-grade plutonium. Enough to build a dozen nuclear weapons." The room spun. The conspiracy wasn't just about money or intelligence. It was about nuclear terrorism on an unimaginable scale. "The plutonium," I managed. "Did they get it?" Torres met my eyes, and I saw my own fear reflected there. "We don't know. The submarine and its cargo vanished without a trace. And according to the communications we intercepted tonight, the real buyers are still out there. My father's crimes weren't just treason, they were potentially the opening act to the greatest national security disaster in American history. And I was the only one who could help stop what was coming next." 6 months later, I stood in the secure briefing room beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by maps of the Pacific Ocean marked with red X's that represented potential nuclear threats. The task force assembled around the mahogany table read like a who's who of American intelligence: CIA Deputy Director Harrison, NSA Cryptography Chief Dr. Martinez, and Admiral Hayes, now promoted to head the newly formed Counterintelligence Task Force. The missing plutonium had consumed my life for half a year. Every lead, every intercepted communication, every fragment of intelligence had passed through my hands. What we'd discovered made my father's conspiracy look like petty theft. "Update, Commander Bennett," Admiral Hayes requested, her tone businesslike but not unkind. I activated the wall display, showing a network of connections spanning 3 continents. "We've identified the buyers. A consortium of rogue states and terrorist organizations calling themselves the Pacific Alliance. They've been planning this operation for 5 years, using my father's network to map U.S. naval movements and identify vulnerabilities." Deputy Director Harrison leaned forward. 5 years. This predates even your father's involvement." "Yes, sir." Marcus Bennett was recruited, not the architect. "The real masterminds have been using American military personnel as unwitting assets for decades." I highlighted several nodes on the network. The missing plutonium was always the end game. Everything else, the intelligence sales, the murdered officers, the cover-ups, was just preparation. Dr. Martinez pulled up a separate screen, showing radiation signatures. "Our satellites detected trace amounts of plutonium-209 in 3 locations. A shipping facility in Myanmar, a warehouse in the Philippines, and," she paused, "a cargo vessel currently en route to the port of Los Angeles." The room went dead silent. "Timeline?" Admiral Hayes asked. 18 hours until the vessel reaches U.S. territorial waters." Martinez replied. "If they've weaponized the plutonium," she didn't need to finish. "A nuclear device detonating in Los Angeles would kill millions and cripple the American economy for decades." "Recommendations?" Hayes asked, looking directly at me. This was the moment I'd been preparing for since that night at the promotion party. All the analysis, all the sleepless nights tracking financial transfers and communication intercepts, had led to this single decision point. "We have 2 options," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Option 1, intercept the vessel at sea with a joint Navy Coast Guard operation. High risk of armed resistance, possible nuclear detonation if they have a dead man's switch. Option 2, Harrison prompted. We let them dock, then execute a precision raid using intelligence I've developed on their operational structure. Lower risk of nuclear incident, but higher risk of the device reaching its intended target." Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display for a long moment. "Your recommendation, Commander?" I thought about Sarah Chen, about the 3 sailors who died because of intelligence my father had sold, about all the Americans who would die if we made the wrong choice. Option 2, but with a modification. We insert a small team aboard the vessel before it docks, someone who can disable any detonation device and confirm the location of the plutonium. That's a suicide mission, Dr. Martinez observed. Not if it's done right. I pulled up the vessel's schematics. I'd been studying this ship for 3 months. I know every corridor, every ventilation shaft, every potential hiding place, and I know something else. The team leader is someone I've been tracking since this whole investigation began. I clicked a surveillance photo that made the room intake collectively. Captain David Liu, former U.S. Navy SEAL, was dishonorably discharged for selling weapons to foreign contractors. He was one of my father's contacts in the original conspiracy. He knows me, trusts me, or at least he thinks he does. Admiral Hayes's eyes narrowed. You're proposing to infiltrate a nuclear terrorism operation using your father's criminal reputation as cover. I'm proposing to finish what Sarah Chen started. She died trying to expose this network. The least I can do is make sure they can't kill millions more. The debate that followed lasted 2 hours. Security protocols, extraction plans, backup procedures, communication channels. But in the end, it came down to a simple truth. I was the only person who had both the technical knowledge to disable a nuclear device and the personal connections to get close enough to try. 12 hours later, I was bobbing in the Pacific Ocean in a one-person submersible, watching the cargo vessel Lucky Dragon approach through my periscope. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me. The original Lucky Dragon had been contaminated by nuclear fallout in 1954. History had a sick sense of humor. The extraction from the sub to the ship's hull went smoothly. Years of training kicked in as I used magnetic clamps to scale the vessel's side, slipping through a maintenance hatch I'd identified from the ship's blueprints. The corridors below deck were narrow and poorly lit, filled with the smell of diesel fuel and human sweat. I found Captain Liu in the cargo hold, standing over a metal crate that made my radiation detector spike into the red zone. He was older than his file photos suggested, maybe 45, with the kind of lean muscle that came from decades of military training and the dead eyes of someone who'd seen too much death. "Commander Bennett," he said without turning around. "I wondered when you'd show up." My blood turned to ice. "Captain Liu, your father told me about you before they arrested him. Said you were the one who brought down his operation." Liu turned, and I saw he was holding a detonator. "Said you were smarter than him, more dedicated. Said if anyone could track us, it would be you." He was right, Liu smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The thing is, your father also told me you were naive, that you still believed in right and wrong, good and evil, that you'd try to save everyone, even when it was impossible." "The plutonium," I said, trying to keep him talking while I calculated distances and angles. "Where is it?" "You're looking at it." Liu gestured to the crate. 20 pounds of weapons-grade plutonium-239, configured in a simple implosion device. Not sophisticated but effective. "Los Angeles has 12 million people. Commander, how many of them do you think you can save?" My earpiece crackled with Admiral Hayes's voice. "Sarah, the extraction team is in position. You need to get out of there now." But I was already moving. The combat training that had seemed useless during my exile in records management suddenly became everything. I dove left as Liu raised his weapon, rolling behind a shipping container as bullets sparked off metal around me. "The detonator," I shouted into my comm unit. "If he triggers it." "I know," Hayes replied. "EMP device ready. On your signal." Liu's voice echoed through the cargo hold. "Your father was wrong about one thing, Commander. He thought you'd sacrifice yourself to save others. But I know better. I know you'll sacrifice others to complete the mission." He was trying to get into my head, making me doubt myself. But as I listened to his footsteps moving through the maze of containers, I realized he was wrong about something too. This wasn't about sacrifice anymore. This was about finishing what Sarah Chen had started. I slipped around the corner, moving silently toward the plutonium crate. Lou was positioned between me and the device, but his attention was focused on finding me among the containers. I had one shot. EMP now, I shouted, diving toward the detonator. The electromagnetic pulse hit the ship like an invisible tsunami, killing every electronic device within a quarter mile. Lou's weapon went dead in his hands. The lights went out and most importantly, the detonator's digital display went dark. But Lou wasn't finished. He lunged toward a backup detonator, a simple mechanical trigger that wouldn't be affected by the EMP. We collided in the darkness, fighting for control of a device that could kill millions. The struggle lasted seconds, but it felt like hours. Lou was stronger, but I was desperate. As we grappled in the darkness, I heard Admiral Hayes's voice through my earpiece, now running on emergency power. The boarding team is coming. Hold on, Sarah. But I didn't need to hold on. As Lou reached for the backup detonator, I did something my father never would have done, something that proved I was nothing like him. I trusted my team. The cargo hold door exploded inward as Navy SEALs flooded the space. Lou spun toward the new threat, giving me the opening I needed. I grabbed the backup detonator and threw it as far as I could into the darkness. The radiation signature that had terrified us for months turned out to be a sophisticated fake. The real plutonium was already in American custody, intercepted at the Myanmar facility 3 days earlier based on intelligence I'd developed. The Lucky Dragon had been a decoy, designed to draw out any remaining conspirators. But Lou didn't know that. As the SEALs secured him, he kept screaming about the millions who would die, the American cities that would burn, the victory of the Pacific Alliance. He never realized he'd been played by the same naive commander he'd underestimated. 3 months later, I stood in the same Pentagon briefing room where this had all begun, but everything was different. The walls were lined with commendations and photos from successful operations. The task force had grown from a handful of officers to a full department, and I was no longer Commander Sarah Bennett. "Congratulations, Captain Bennett," Admiral Hayes said, pinning the new rank insignia to my collar. "Your promotion is well-deserved. Captain, the rank my father had achieved was 35. I'd earned it at 32, and unlike his promotion, mine hadn't been bought with blood money and betrayal. Thank you, ma'am." "There's something else," Hayes continued, handing me a sealed envelope. "A letter from federal prison. Your father wanted you to have this." I almost refused, but something in Hayes's expression made me reconsider. I opened the envelope carefully. "Sarah, I called you a failure at my promotion party because I knew what I'd become and couldn't bear to see what you were becoming. Everything I should have been. You succeeded not despite being my daughter, but because you chose to be better than me. The girl who wanted nothing more than to make me proud ended up saving her country. I couldn't be prouder, and I couldn't be more ashamed. Stay better than me. The Navy needs officers like you. Love always, Dad." I folded the letter carefully and put it in my jacket pocket, next to my heart, where it belonged. "What's next?" I asked Admiral Hayes. She smiled and handed me another file. This one marked Operation Deepwater Eyes Only. "There's a situation developing in the South China Sea, something involving missing naval assets and communication intercepts that don't add up. We need someone who specializes in uncovering uncomfortable truths." I opened the file, already feeling the familiar thrill of a new puzzle to solve. Another conspiracy to unravel, another chance to prove that sometimes the only way to honor your family is to be nothing like them. "When do we start?" "We already have," Hayes replied. "Welcome to the future, Captain Bennett." As I walked out of the Pentagon that day, I thought about the girl who'd once stood in her father's shadow, desperate for his approval. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who'd learned that the highest honor wasn't making your parents proud. It was making your country safe. The failure Marcus Bennett had dismissed at his promotion party had just been promoted to lead the most successful counterintelligence operation in naval history. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you'd never be. And sometimes, That's enough. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.